Seeking life-changing knowledge? You've stepped into the right place. Welcome to Bold Perspectives with Samantha Postman. In every episode, discover, explore, and grow your personal or professional self with real and relevant knowledge to help you improve your own life and make a positive impact in the world around you. Tune in for honest insights, life advice, inspirational wisdom, and the occasional salty rants. Because you are meant to live a better and bolder life.
Hey everyone, it's Samantha Postman with the Bold Perspectives podcast, and we've got a treat for you today. It's a little different than normal. So my friend Trey is in this writing online and publishing community that I'm with, and I was going to record a solo cast today, and I wasn't feeling it. So I reached out to my friend Trey. We've never talked before other than some chats to this community group, and I reached out to my friend Trey, and I was like, do you want to do an impromptu podcast with me? And he's like, sweet, I'm up for that. So you are getting the uncut Trey and Samantha show. We really like to, I think we both really connect in talking about life and the journey of life. And so anyway, Trey, I don't know a ton about you. So tell me about yourself. This is so fun. I love it. I'm going to do this again.
Right? Yeah. I mean, we chatted on in the group a little bit and on that one Twitter space for a little while, but we never really connected through there. But yeah, I mean, my name's Trey. I am currently a software engineer at Amazon AWS, but I've been doing that for about 4 or 5 years now. But I originally came from audio engineering and DJing and working in the entertainment industry. So I did that for about 15 years before I came over to software. And now I'm here. I live out in wonderful Seattle, Washington, the beautiful Pacific Northwest. And I've got 4 kids, a wonderful partner here, and just, journeying through life as we go and enjoying now being a little bit more out with it with things like our wonderful writing that we're doing.
Yeah, something that I've noticed on Twitter that I love about you is like, I know that you've got the strong professional self, but you choose to hold it back. It's there. But like, I have the same thing. Like, I'm a tax accountant by first trade. I've closed my practice now, but I have a really, like, one of my little, I guess, giftings is like online product reviews. And I do it for kicks on the side a bit. But I don't really talk about it because I feel like there's so many people on Twitter who've got great business advice and all these marketing tips and, 20 tips to a better you on Twitter. I mean, yeah, I could probably raise my following group if I went by it, but I feel like life advice is so unique, and you can use your professional self and what you've learned through that. And it kind of like, I see it coming through in you, which is what you drew it to me. You don't straight out say it, but it comes through you. And that's something that I really love about your writing.
Yeah. It's interesting when I started the program and they tell you like take your 3 buckets that you're going to kind of talk about. And I did like kind of professional and personal development. And in there I do want to start doing a little bit more of the technical and the actual like writing on tech and software and those, because I have a lot of things. And one of the main reasons I wanted to start writing in public is because I've been doing a lot of kind of mentoring in semi-private spaces like Slack groups and things like that. And I just found myself like repeating myself. I'm like, I need to actually put this somewhere and I can just point to it rather than continually repeating and writing the same thing to people. Right. And so that's actually what started it. And then since then, I'm like, I haven't really done any of that writing yet. Like, but I feel that it's been one of the things of, this is the first iteration I'm doing. I know you're one of the alumni of the program at this point. And I'm just like trying to get the habit down, I think. Yeah. And it was just kind of like really kind of coming into what speaks to me most. And because I see, and maybe it's a factor of timing and trying to get things more quickly. I see the technical aspect I see myself being more critical of that, trying to get something like that. So it might take me a little bit more time involvement to do those. So I want to get the writing side down. And that's where one of the big things that came out too for me was changing careers in the last 5 years into software from that. it was drawing a lot of the connections from previous careers and previous work and things, and how can I draw that out to what I'm doing now and showcase that and bring the strengths and really lean on those strengths when you're coming into a brand new career to succeed in that. I think that's one of the aspects that really came out a lot, especially right now in the writing, because I have most of my essays, the stories I've been pulling from have been from my audio engineering and DJing days. In that time, I haven't pulled a lot from the last 5 years yet.
I think that takes a bit of courage too. It's interesting. You think that telling, for at least me, I think that telling the personal would be more courage, but that was easier in some ways than the business. Because with business, I'm like, maybe it's a little bit of imposter syndrome. Because I'm like, once I put my business expertise out there, then people are like, you're full of it. Like, you don't really know what you're talking about. Even though I've like cut 3 months off development for an online product and like all this stuff, but I'm like, the second I say I'm an expert at something, I'm like, I think that was it. But, I did that 30 days. I'm a slow writer. Some of those essays took me 4 hours. Mind you, mine have a lot of depth to them. I think it's because I have so much to add to it that I'm trying to filter like what's going to go in there. If I had just wrote about things I've learned in business, in some ways it would go faster, I think, because it's muscle memory in many ways. But I'm actually just part-time this term because trying to get my podcast launched and a bunch of things. But, interestingly enough, I think you might have read that in the group, but I landed a TED Talk for September. And it wasn't because I wrote anything about business.
Yeah, we chatted about this in the Twitter space a little bit on you getting that, which was like a big congratulations on landing that thing. It's doing those types of talks. I've done conference talks and things like that as well in the past, and they're a lot of fun. It's an involved process, and a lot of people, when they're getting into those, do and don't realize some people think about it and they're like, oh, it's putting yourself out there, but the work behind them comes out. It's a lot. The ones I did, even especially when it comes down to smaller, like the first ones were like 25 to 30 minutes that I did, and those it took a decent bit and a lot of thought behind them. And then one of the last ones, it was like a lightning. I went for a 25-minute talk and it came down, they gave me like a lightning talk, like 10-minute talk. I'm like, okay, that's going to take me a month longer to prep, because now I had to, as with these essays, and as you're saying, I have a lot to say. Like, one of the biggest things I have with the atomic essay format is that 250 words, like keeping it down into that. When by the time I'm done brain dumping, I'm like, okay, now I have to cut half of everything I wrote.
I did like this term. We have this atomic essay with a specific size because Twitter's just resized everything. And then we have a new template as well. In my last one, it wasn't quite constricted. It would just Twitter would just show the title. So it didn't really matter if you went over the 250 because it didn't have to fit in the screen. But now if you go over that like specific size, it won't, I think when on the desktop, I think it shows the title, but on a phone, it only shows the middle. So it doesn't work.
Yeah, it'll cut into the middle side.
I wish Twitter, if you're listening, please fix that. So, so I did a lot of mine around 400, and that still took me quite a while. But now I'm starting to, I just put my blog up and I've started throwing some of those on there, and I'm kind of glad I'm at 400 because, it's a couple minute read, but I do get 250s pretty tight. And I think that the quality of essays, when you can go up to like 350, kind of adds a bit, because then you have room for a personal element. At 250, it's really hard to communicate knowledge and a personal element. I mean, if you're really gifted at it, they both are together, but
it's that complete like golden intersection thing that Nicole talks about and getting that. And that's definitely one of the things I struggle with on there. And it's funny because even one of my latest ones was titled 250 words is hard. Here's 304 why, because I couldn't even put why 250 words is hard in 250 words.
Actually, talking about this really reminds me of like people who are in the audiences, like YouTube, Twitter, like everything, it's all like, you need to get this down to 2 minutes or I'm not going to listen to you. You need to get this down to 1 minute. You need to get this down to 5 minutes or I'm not going to listen to you. My time is worth X amount. I have the same thing when I listen to like software. People will say to me, well, if only they could get this down to 3 clicks. and I'm just like, yeah, do you understand that 3 clicks is like, maybe another 20 grand for that company to get on the front end it down to 3 clicks. And so there's this underappreciation of what it takes to get it down to these tiny few seconds. And that's the part that's making me nervous about TED. Cause I have a lot to say. And I'm a person who jam packs information. I'm like an information, I don't know, queen. I love information. More information, you're prepared for just about anything, any conversation, anything that's going to throw it at you. And I'm just curious as can be. So I literally accumulate information. I'm like a sponge. Everything around me just sucks right in. And so when it's time to talk, I'm just like, okay.
Yeah.
So if you have any tips for me, I'd love to hear, if you were to go to talk to yourself, okay, next time you do, okay, side note before we get to that. When I did my master's a few years ago, a friend of mine was doing her master's at the same time. And she's like, yeah, I got to go home and write my 20 page essay. And I'm like, you get 20 pages? And she's like, yeah, they're all like that. And I'm like, man, my master's are 2 pages. And she's like, that's a master's? That's not a real master's. And I'm like, yeah, well, one time I spent 6 hours just trying to get it down to 2 pages because the professor would not take over 2 pages. And he said, if you can't express it in 2 pages, you don't know what you're talking about, or you're BSing your way to the full of, I don't need to read 20 pages of you BSing. I mean, yeah, you probably get it, but it's not points for extra conversation. So anyway, so that really helped. So you think the atomic essay would be easy for me after 2 years of writing 2-page master's papers? It wasn't.
Well, that's that exact kind of what he's saying there is almost exactly from Albert Einstein. He is the one that kind of quoted, if you can't explain it simply, then you don't understand it well enough.
Right.
There's actually even more complexity into that. And it comes into it's actually, I'll send you the exact essay that had that 250 words is tough. Here's 304 on why. Because I have several of these, and that's exactly what it was on things like him, Albert Einstein quoting on that. There's a book called TED Talks.
Yeah.
That is from
I've read it.
Chris Anderson. Yeah. And there they talk about exactly why it's 18 minutes for those, which was a really great forcing factor and thinking about that. And then you go into aspects of it's kind of attributed to Woodrow Wilson, but there's also his version of it is even kind of a remixed version of older ones, and basically saying that if I'm to speak for 10 minutes, I need a week for preparation. If an hour, I'm ready now. We get that thing. It's we have people like us, we have a lot of information. If you get us on that right subject, and you want me to talk right now, if I have a lot of time, let's go. I can chat all day about different things. But when you have to be concise with your words and that environment, it really forces you, and it takes time to really refine and find those ways to essentially pump as much content in as little bit of time or wording as possible. The presentations work in a good way because at least you can get also a visual element with the words and what you're actually speaking in many ways. Of course, the classic of a picture is worth 1,000 words and being able to do that. But then it's also a balance there because you don't want people paying attention just to your presentation and the slides. You want them listening to what you're saying. And so it's really interesting to find those balance with presentations. Actually, where you have multimedia things come in. What you were
just saying actually reminds, I guess that's what our podcast is going to be about. Now I know what it is. We didn't know what we were going to talk about, but I know now. It's basically about the art of, essentially what we're doing is the art of taking, to refining into a simpler message for people. But it reminds me kind of of what we're learning with Twitter. And what I love about Twitter is I'm getting to be a better writer, taking out all those extra little words. And it's sort of what you were saying there too. If you can put a picture up there, I mean, there's that saying we all know, picture's worth 1,000 words. It's like that.
Right.
You associate with something they already know. And when you're writing in a very small way, that's important too. Try to connect with, now that we're saying, see, I can do that. Like using metaphors and stuff is a very quick way to communicate a large message in a very quick amount of time. Because if you can get people's picture what you just said without using all the words, it's very quick. And you just have to take out all the little extra filler stuff. The thing with me is that I talk fast and I think fast, and I don't give people enough filler to catch up. So I'm just like bang, 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 bang. And, and I'm like, oh, that's right. Most people we've had time to think about things. I think a lot. And so I talked to lots of people. I'm a practice speaker, and people aren't always practice listeners. And especially about the subject we might be talking about. So that's something I just self-taught myself. I know I asked you, and then I ended up, you ask yourself. I used to work in an office, and I'd go to my boss and I'd be like, hey, I need some help with this. And she'd be like, what's your problem? And I'm like, I'm like, never mind, I figured it out. It's like, glad to help, come in anytime.
The classic rubber ducking, essentially. It's like, just need to actually talk to somebody about it, and then solving our own problems for us during that, and actually being able to clarify and trying to clarify that through speaking the words out. I mean, that's a classic software engineering thing, is it's rubber duck debugging. Right? Oh, you have an issue, trying to figure out what the bug is. Well, before you actually go and talk to somebody about it, I actually talk to Homer about it on my desk right here. And I tell Homer my problem. And then he either goes, oh, and then, or I might figure it out, or I might go off, and then I'll actually like text or send a message over to one of my teammates and actually start talking to them through that. But speaking it out loud helps us clarify so many things.
That's interesting that you say that, because I was telling you that I'm a tax accountant by first trade. And whenever I had clients in front of me, they'd always be like, huh? Did you have a question for me? And I'd be like, oh, sorry, I'm not talking to you. I'm just talking. I'll let you know when I have a question. And I've heard that's pretty common. I haven't statistically gone and done some sort of analysis or something, survey, but I heard it's really common with people who do finance work. And I wonder if that was partly how I could do it so sharply, was because I was kind of like bantering. I'd be like, okay, I need to talk about this. And then I have, this client's got this investment over here. And I didn't say everything out loud, but I think that was partially what I was doing, is I was just working out the little kinks. If they've got this issue over here and this one over here, what can I do to make it the best situation?
Yeah. And when you're somebody like that too, and I think this, going back to kind of like preparing for talks and things like that, whenever I have one, the strategy that I use to figure out like the initial drafts of what I'm talking is, I'll basically stand in here, or when I was in office, I would book a conference room or something, and I would just put my camera on and start recording and just talk about it. Just go off the cuff and just chat about it for 30, 45 minutes or whatever. I'd have a whiteboard behind me, which is actually what's behind this thing. And I would jot quick notes about the key subjects that I wanted to key in on. But then I would just do that. And I would do that every single day for a week or so. And you would be able to really key in on the things, on those subjects that you really want. But what it prepares you for is, like, when you're doing these types of talks, you don't want to have like a teleprompter or something. Right. And you also don't want to memorize line for line, and it sounds like you're just reciting whatever. You want to be able to kind of feel like it's off the cuff, but not be off the cuff, because it sounds like you're probably a lot like me. Once I start going off the cuff, then I don't know where the heck I'm going to go. And then I'm going to definitely blast past the 18 minutes.
I'm definitely going to have to practice that one.
But what it allows you to do is, every time, what I found is that I'll hit those key points, but every time it's a little bit different, and it helps refine those ideas, and helps me to be able to, now, whenever I do those, my speaker notes are just one or two words, little tiny phrases that keep me in line with what I wanted to talk about. But because I've continually done this and recited it and rehearsed it, essentially, but still but in that way that I'm not reciting, rehearsing, it still gives that kind of off the cuff feel, but I also have a kind of like a complete agenda, essentially, and making sure I'm hitting my points. I found this, I can't remember, it was one of these, another blog post essentially, that I found this strategy that works. And it's one of the guys in tech that runs tech conferences and one of the bigger ones. And that was kind of like one of his ways that he did it. And I was just like, this is really interesting. And that's what I started doing. I was like, it's just fun because it's kind of that rubber duck thing, talking to other people, but then you can really refine it, and it allows you to just work through what your brain is doing. And every time you might get in a new point that's like, oh, I didn't know I wanted to go in that direction here instead of that direction. And then by the end, you actually, each way, you can almost feel it. I've even had ones where I was giving a talk, and you can kind of like read the audience and see how they're engaging with different things. And it's one of the reasons I keep my slides kind of really minimal, is because I could tell what was going on. And because I've done this kind of impromptu type rehearsal a little bit, I actually thought I was going to go this way, but in the middle of the talk was able to go this way really succinctly and like really easily because I had that type of practice.
I think that just takes a type of person though, too. Like with teaching, I can do that too. If you're really prepared and you're really knowledgeable, then you can just about talk about anything within that range and add to it as people add into you. So like I'd be teaching, I probably, when I teach, have double the amount of material I really need, because I've got all the stuff that I prepared and then all the stuff I cut out and then what I was actually going to teach. But I'm never married to my material. So I've got, maybe it's not the right way to do it. Teachers are going to tell you what you need to have your but I'm more like, hey, this is the takeaway I want, or what I'm hoping to leave them with. And then when the room comes in, there's an energy, someone asks a question. And sometimes I'm like, I literally on the fly, I'm dumping half of it and adding in the stuff that I took out because it's more relevant, might be the questions. And then at the end of the day, whenever I'm teaching, I'm always thinking whatever's going on in this room is more important than any material I've ever prepped. So, it could even be that someone shares in the group, I lost my job today or yesterday, and I literally will just stop the entire class. I'll sit down and be like, that sucks. Well, I didn't like that job anyway. Well, I know you didn't like your job because you told me that. However, it still hurts. Like when you don't get to choose, that people get, when you get to choose when you leave a place, it's on you. And it's like a breakup. If you break up with someone else, it's not near as hard as being the one who was broken up with. So when it's out of our control and we're not the one choosing and readying ourselves, it's tough. I don't care how you can rationalize that. So I would just stop the room, just sit down and have a conversation. Obviously that was a particular small room. And then everything is just settled, because there's nothing like someone sharing something super deep and then not addressing it. And it's like the elephant in the room after. It's like, oh, your agenda is super important. I don't know, but no agenda is that important actually. And, people will stay late. I'll offer and be like, you know what, we did have some, a little bit extra to go through. If you'd like to stay, you're welcome to stay. When I was teaching, I'd always book an extra half an hour after and before. So I was always there 30 minutes early so people could come early and talk. And I always stayed 30 minutes late in case people wanted to talk about anything that came up from the lesson or maybe their personal life. And so it always gave me wiggle room for that. So, So then see what I mean? I'm not used. So I do that. And then this 18 minutes is freaking me out, but I will be okay. I'm already practicing, and I haven't wrote it yet. I've been writing it in my head. So every time someone's like, what's your podcast? What's your podcast? Yeah, I get that asked a lot. What's your podcast about? What's your TED Talk about? And then I'm like, you know what? I did a mini audition, but I was permitted to get a little wiggle room to move around in it. And so I'm like, and then I try it. And every time I talk to people, I concentrate on a different piece. Obviously I can't give them an 18-minute TED Talk. So I'm like, this is one aspect of it. And then I talk about it and I'm like, oh, I just literally wrote that in my head right now. So, and sometimes if it's going really well, I'm like, do you mind if I hit the record a minute? And I stick my otter on. It's like my best friend. I stick my otter on and catch the last 3 quarters. So I've got all these pieces that are starting. So I'm hoping that when I go to write it, I've got a good portion of it. And the cool thing is I get a reaction right away because people look at me and like, that's seriously what you're going to say. I'll be like, yep, ditching those few lines. They sounded cool in the shower.
Right. I mean, that goes back into I guess like one of the things that like Ship 30, they had us look at was that Jerry Springer podcast with Tim Ferriss, and that episode on how like, yeah, comedians, like they have to test all their material right there in front of the audience. There's no better way to get direct feedback on exactly if something is going to work or not than to have any kind of audience at all.
Yeah.
I got this from like DJing and performing with audio and entertainment, like especially like DJing. It was definitely those things of like, well, when I transition from one song to another song, I get complete direct feedback from all that entire floor of like, oh, well, they just stopped dancing. But then there's also, but what many people don't even realize on there, and I'm actually looking at writing an essay on this as well, is something about like rotating the room, and that aspect was that most DJs would just look at the floor, like the dance floor, and be like, oh, that didn't work. Those people went off, but then they didn't realize that half the people that were at the bar just started moving towards the dance floor.
Yeah.
And that was actually a key thing that you want to do in that environment. Is you want to continually rotate people through the different environments. And that way everybody continued, like not only is the dance floor staying full and everybody's staying happy and everybody's dancing, but then the bar's staying full and the people that hired you are still happy because they're also making money there and everybody's going.
Well, and the energy continues too. That's really brilliant because, you know, you can only hold that high energy up for a period of time and then it's rest time. Let's come back and do it again. So you're really holding a long-term energy as opposed to like, I did some track and field when I was in high school or junior high actually. And like, it's like sprinting, you know, everybody's dancing like crazy when it's out, but then peters out. And the next thing you know, you've got the few slow dancers at the end. But like what you did is quite brilliant. It's like a music piece. Actually, it reminds me a lot of a music piece. It's like, you know, you've got these strong elements and then you've got these pulled back kind of, you know, like if you belted out a song the entire time, well, no, it's tiring for people. It doesn't matter if you're a brilliant singer.
Yeah. Putting it into that aspect is like, it's chorus versus verse.
Right. That's what I was saying.
The song, like, yeah, exactly. It's that aspect. And like the owner of that, one of the nightclubs I worked at was the person that taught me. And he actually brought that club from like Bourbon Street in New Orleans to Florida where we were. And he's the one that kind of taught me that aspect of it. And it was funny because he goes like, yeah, here you're going to be rotating this, but actually realize that there's also people walking right outside the door. And he got this from being 15 years on Bourbon Street. Is like, you're not just rotating the room, you're rotating the street inside and out as well, like pulling people in and letting the entire thing breathe and just moving energy around. It was an aspect that like kind of went, whoa.
Well, there's something about being at the back of the room. You know, if you're a leader, you know, I want to be at the front, but at the front, you can't see everything. You think you can, but you actually can't. You can see a lot more from the back of the room than you can see from the front. So like sometimes like I used to mentor and there's sometimes be like 100 young adults in the room. And the ones at the very back, I mean, they're getting a lot. I mean, yes, they're not as interactive with the speaker, but they're getting a lot more information from the back of the room. And I was at the back. And so I learned so much about what was going on with the young adults. I could see right away who's having a bad day based on body language, who sits in the corner, you know, which two are engaging. And so when we had breaks or at the end, I knew exactly where to go because I could see what was going on from the back of the room. I knew exactly what was going on in the room. And I knew exactly how the speaker was connecting or not connecting with people or certain people. So might say something that was offensive to kind of a little group, you know, not intentionally, but, you know, and then I just kind of go over there and then just, you know, smooth things over later because I kind of knew that, you know, when they're all like in the corner, I was like, oh, okay, I need to go over there and smooth a few things over. But I wouldn't have known that from the front. It's interesting that you said that about DJing. My nephew, his name is Asher Postman, and he started out as a DJ, gifted musically, and he does a lot of like, I don't know if you ever saw this one. He's got millions of hits or at least over 1 million. It's called Dubai is Lit. So he does these like remixes on, you know, viral videos and stuff, viral memes. I don't know if that's quite a meme. And then now he does a lot of remixing and stuff. And he started as a DJ, but now he's doing a lot of his own music, and he's great at it, probably because he was great at both because of what you said. He understands music. He understands people, how people move to music. Mm-hmm. Actually, I'm just going to, this reminds me, a couple years ago, we were hosting a wedding on the yard, and the guy who did the DJ, we have a farm, and he thought it was really cool to if it would be okay to bring his wife out the next day to clean everything up, because we had the wedding pretty late. We don't have to worry about, neighbors or anything like that. So he brought his wife by the next day. And so I chatted up with her while he was cleaning up all the audio equipment. And she says to me, I started chatting up, and I'm like, so, how do you fill your days? I never ask people I rarely ask women, especially what they're doing for work, because they get uncomfortable. So I'm like, how do you fill your days? And she's like, oh, actually, I'm working in a senior complex, and I do recreational therapy, which is like crafts and different movement things and things like that. And I'm like, oh, that sounds super fascinating. I bet you learn a lot from them. And then she kind of got her body language went down. And then she kind of was like, yeah, but I went for 4 years for a music degree. And she goes, I really feel like I spent all that money and wasted it. And I just really, obviously she had some shame with it and just felt really low about it. And so I said, I don't know why. Well, I'm like that. I kind of have these insightful things sometimes. And so I was talking to her, I was like, well, actually what you were doing, because I think she's really good at it based on what she was telling me she was doing. I'm like, part of the reason you're probably really good at it is because you understand music. She goes, well, what do you mean by that? I'm like, well, when you're running an hour program with your seniors, do you build in more energetic periods and then, a slow paced one where they can kind of just get themselves back together, and maybe it's something they kind of do on their own for a little bit? And she goes, well, yeah, I do that. And I'm like, it's the same as a chorus and a verse. Yep. And I'm like, what you're doing, that rhythm is because you understand rhythm. But she was like, oh, and I'm like, doesn't matter what you do, what you run, that music degree is going to take you far. And she was like, dang, I'm so glad I took 4 years of music now. And I'm like, everything you do is like a form of music.
It's pretty impressive. When you dig into how music influences our lives in so many different ways, and exactly that aspect of even not even just a song, but when you think about an album, mm-hmm. that you sequence tracks, bands and people will sequence tracks. As a DJ, doing a full mix, I sequence tracks, mm-hmm. not just the individual things, but how we're flowing to get that energy up and down, how you switch from one key to another key. Yeah. In order specifically to I know that going from this key to this key brings the energy up. I know that going down to this one will actually bring it down a little bit, and mm-hmm. being able to sequence because of that energy to allow people to breathe and to really experience the entire thing. And then you even go to the next stage of oh, well, we're making not just an album or a set, but then think about a concert. You actually want to filter the bands a specific way and book people in certain slots because their style of music will mm-hmm. have the energy going in a specific direction. It's definitely an aspect of it that people don't think about, and how that affects different presentations and how you do classes and all different aspects of the life. So I'm really happy you were able to key in for that person, because I see that a lot as well. Well,
hopefully people who are listening to that will know it too. Now, I don't know if you knew this, but I'm actually a managing partner of a grain farm, of a crop farm out in Alberta. And when we were just talking, I thought of another rhythm, I guess, if you will, which is somewhat musical to me. So in the spring, everything comes to life again, and there's an energy about that. And I was just thinking about this whole idea of, chorus and verse. So I feel there's different parts of the year that have this rhythm to it. And it's funny because in the spring, people will meet me and they'll be like, oh, how is it going at the farm? And I'm like, there's this rhythm with farming. We have the planting season, and then we have the care season, and then we have the harvest season, and then we have the rest season. So it's a lot like music, actually, which is maybe why we love music so much, because it replicates like life patterns. I mean, our life is like that. We're born, there's this excitement about being born, and we go through these periods of high learning and then low learning and then high learning. And, we age and we have these periods of rest. But farming is like that. And I love especially because of farming, we get the obvious rhythm of planting. And in the city, a lot of people miss that now. They don't have that regular rhythm. And I find it it's very therapeutic. There's something about, and I'm a person who likes different things. I like different food. I love travel. I rarely travel to the same place twice, other than local mountain places. But like when I travel abroad, I've been all over the world. I rarely go back to the same place twice. If I go back to the same country, I usually go to a different part of the country. Yeah. So, but this rhythm thing, there's something to it, right?
But it's definitely something to it. And I like, also kind of like bringing back what you were talking about like positioning and like front of the room, back of the room, and things like that. One of the aspects that I bring in from like that I actually go into in music, when like say going to a concert, and this is something that this is a little key in that might sell tickets around this one area and like concert seating. Whenever you're looking at a concert, sure, it's nice to be like close up to the band. You can see them. You can like, you get that experience. Or some people like to be in the very back and be able to like see the whole thing. Let me tell you where the best seat is.
Okay, let's hear it.
Right there in the middle, where the audio engineer and the lighting engineer, and they have that booth set up, and it's back, but it's not in the very, like it's in the middle, because what it is that person is controlling the entire sound, the entire stage.
Right.
And here's the key. While they're mixing, like making the music sound great for the entire audience and doing it with that in mind, they're standing right there. They're hearing it right there.
Yeah.
The best sound is going to come from right there.
Yeah.
The lighting guy with controlling all of that stuff, he's doing it from right there.
Yeah.
It's not.
So it's going to sound great. It's going to sound great to the person standing there.
If you are like in those seats right by there, you're going to have the most full experience in that aspect. However, there is times when you might want to move forward into like the pit right in front of the stage to get that more experience right there with the artist. The intimate and be intimate, but there's that trade-off, right? Yeah. You're trading off the experience of the entire thing to try and get more intimate with a specific person. And so it's interesting whenever you look at that. And I've thought about like where people are in these, and where people, like whenever we're going to these things, talking to all my friends on like, okay, well, where do you want to go? How do you want to experience this? And they look at me when I first like talk about it, I was like, wait, nobody's ever asked me how I want to experience this show. And I'm like, well, I've been working in concerts for a long time. Like we actually set up, like it's set up for an experience. How do you want to do that? And it's like, wow, like I'm just been like, I always want to get up front, or I want to get like over here.
It's interesting that you say it like that. Cause like when I would mentor and I would meet young adults and I invite them to the group, I would ask them questions about them, and I can gauge people really quickly. So I could get a pretty good idea about who would I want to connect them to. But often it was like, I might ask it, but not in a direct way, what kind of, are you looking for relationships? Are you looking for friends? Or are you looking for knowledge? Are you looking for, so when you ask, are you looking to find a mate? Half of them are there to look for a mate, which is, that's a great place to find one. Then that would influence my recommendation for them.
Right.
What time they should come. Make sure you're coming early. That's when this particular group kind of shows up. Like the ones that really are community orientated, they're early chatting and having coffee and catching up, and they're all going to, somewhere after too. So like, I'd be like, make sure you do those, because when you're sitting during the knowledge part, you're not really talking to anybody. So if you're there for community and you only come for the knowledge part, you're not going to be building community. So what is it that you're looking for? If you're only there for the knowledge, show up the second it starts and leave the second it's over. Then, you got what you need out of it. But also I would challenge people and ask them why that was the experience they were looking for, which is a little different than what you were doing. I'd be like, is it because you're on a time constraint? And maybe I didn't always ask them a direct question. it depended on how it would go, but I could get a pretty good sense. And it could just be that they were just insecure. They did really want to meet people, but they just didn't know how. So I didn't always, sometimes they're really raw like that. And other times I'd kind of pick it up and then I just go, you know what, I know somebody. And when they would come, I would connect them with someone specific who I thought would be a really good fit for them. So, and then I already queued somebody else up and I'd be like, hey, I just invited Jeremy to the group. He's going to be coming on Thursday. And so, and then that person would just make sure that they, sat with them and chatted up just a small amount and just, I never forced the energy. But it's something about like why. So there was another question. So what experience do you want? And why is it that you want that experience?
Yeah, definitely.
So thinking that in mind, like that whole verse versus chorus, that's the part I'm going to have trouble with the 18 minutes, I think, because I'm definitely in 18 minutes, I'm going to be like, feeling like I got to like power that. I'm going to be like, so even just talking to me, I'm sure you can pick that up, right? It's like super high energy when I get my adrenaline going. So it'll be like trying to just pull back a little and take those slow minutes. I have a trauma story to share that I'm going to include in there. So I'll hit the emotional and that will be slow. Right. And it's at the very beginning as well, which will suit that well. Now that I didn't really think about that, but yeah, that's a good place for it. I hate starting out with trauma stuff. I don't want to be like the big sob story person. Mm-hmm. I've had it. My life is a sob story in many ways, but I just don't talk about it all the time. So I'm a little reluctant to even bringing it up at the TED Talk, to be honest. But just remembering that there needs to be a little bit of a build in of the verse and of the chorus and just a little audience rest time to take it in. Yeah.
Whenever like bringing stories into those aspects to get those kind of golden intersection moments, what I definitely look at with those is seeing which stories I want to add in there. And seeing like when I talk about those stories and I almost like kind of key in on the aspects of those stories that I want to talk about and how I want to talk about those as separate entities, and then kind of feel like, okay, well, what does this feel like? And what is this? Is it more of going back to the chorus verse type of a thing? Well, is this more of a energetic chorus side of things, or is it the real story, which is kind of the story side's kind of always kind of given to the verse, like that's supposed to be a story, or is it even a bridge that pulls back and feels different from the rest of the entire like song and just connects to things, but gives you that little bit of a pulling away from what we've been feeling to feel something else and then coming back into it. And that way, at least I can sequence them in a way and figure out, okay, now I know, like, because I've done them individually and seen what the energy is individually, I can start sequencing them and see what the flow of energy feels like throughout the entire thing.
It sounds like you're meant for a TED Talk.
Maybe one day.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I wish we could talk longer. I gotta jump off onto another meeting here. Super great talking to you. I feel like we could talk another hour because we didn't really get in. I mean, this is great stuff, but like really meaty stuff. So if you're up for it, love to have another meeting sometime and talk. You're really easy.
Yeah, we can definitely. I'm always down to chat and talk about these things, and maybe next time we'll actually plan something and we'll know what's going on before.
Yeah, we should do a planned one.
Two ones really work, but
Well, you know what? I think there's a lot of value by talking about music and rhythm, and then just talking about what it's like for an artist to get something, like even to get a song down to a couple of minutes, like how much work it takes to get it down. But like that's why there's perseverance and grit, and that's why they're successful, because they can take something so large and make it small. That's a lot of work. And so like people want to know what it takes to succeed. What it takes to succeed is taking all of this and then bringing it down and filtering it down and settling it in, or not settling. It's they can't get it, cook it, like I'll get it as soon as I'm off the call, like when you're cooking and you get it all down to the very small bit at the bottom.
Breaking it down to.
Yeah, we'll just say that. Okay. Anyway, so everyone knows what I'm talking about. So when we filter everything down and get to the meaty part of it, right? So that's where a lot of the success comes. And when we hear people who are successful, I mean, we're just hearing what we see in public is what they were already doing for a really long time before. And then we see this really fine sharpness to it. And we're like, dang, look at how they did that. Well, what you need to look at is that's the 2-3 minute version of many, many, many hours and years of training and education. I got hired for consulting a little while ago, and the guy asked me for my hourly rate, and I gave it to him. He's like, okay. And he's like, well, are we going to do like a ton of prep with that? Like, he just figured I was going to have all these extra hours. I'm like, I have educated, trained, and done this so much that is intuition for me. If you want me to go through all of your stuff ahead of time, there's a fee for that. And this is my fee for that. And then he was like, okay, I trust that, because in his industry, he is a rock star as well. And so when I said that, he knew exactly what I was saying. He was saying, I mean, isn't there that story about Henry Ford, who had somebody come in to fix something in their engineering department? I thought it was Henry Ford. I think that he had a bunch of people coming in to fix, was it Henry Ford?
I'm not sure on that one. There is the Picasso napkin drawing story is the one that I key in on that aspect.
Oh, I'm talking about the one. I'm going to end up being late on my next one here. I was talking about the one where I thought it was Henry Ford, and he called in a bunch of people to work on it. I may be wrong with it. And, nobody could fix it. So he brought in another guy, and he stayed overnight. And then literally the next morning, he's like, you just need to do X, X, and X. And then I think he sent them like a $10,000 bill. And he was like, what? And he's like, I need a breakdown of that. So I guess he sent something back and just basically said, $9,999 to learn how to do this, $1 to tell you where to put it. And I was just like, people underestimate, they wonder why, there's a $10 an hour job versus, $450. Well, like, if you add up how many hours, the unpaid hours, by the way, like, I am super educated, super trained, and I am not paid in most of that. So, but I can do it like this, just like you can. So there's definitely value in people understanding that what you get, the boiled down version. There we go. The boiled down version. I knew it was in there. All right. So it was really great. We just need to record a closing, and I'm going to be going in late. So do you want to do the closing? Tell everyone let's do it. Everyone's I don't even think I'm going to cut all this, to be honest. All right, Trey. I don't even know
how to close this right now.
Oh,
it's been great. No, it's been great chatting with you on all of this and really digging into these aspects of, an impromptu thing. And like, who knew that we were going to come in here and all of a sudden break this down to rhythm and music and kind of the energies of life and how those move around. I had no clue.
No, I love it.
It's been excellent.
Okay. Well, thanks for being on with me today. I really appreciate it, Trey. We have to do this again.
Definitely.
All right. Do a little wave for me. All right. All right. Thanks, Trey.
Thanks for listening to Bold Perspectives with Samantha Postman. We'd love to hear which insights added value to your life or the lives of others. To help support the podcast, please share the love on social media. Leave a rating or a review. If you don't want to miss out on exclusive content, sign up for her personal email letters. Check out Samantha's website at samanthapostman.com. Follow her on YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram. Thanks for your amazing support. We'll see you again. And remember, you are meant to live a better and bolder life.